Sally Bliumis-Dunn, and welcome to Poetry Break. We're so lucky to have Margo Stever as our guest. Margo is a wonderful poet whose book Frozen Spring won the first book prize for Midlist Press, and her chapbook, Reading the Night Sky, was chosen by Riverstone Press in 1996. Her poems have appeared in Radipalax, the Connecticut Review, many, many publications, and I highly recommend her book, Frozen Spring. Margo and her husband Don also started the Hudson Valley Writers Center over in Sleepy Hollow, New York, which is housed in a beautiful old railroad station building. It's about a half hour from Greenwich, and I strongly suggest Greenwich readers and lovers of literature to come and hear readings every Friday and Sunday night, I believe.
We're on the web at www.writerscenter.org, and you can get our calendar, and we have readings throughout the year, open mic nights, and a number of other events.
Yes, and also Margo and Don started Slapping Hole Press, which focuses on emerging writers, which is unusual, beautiful quality chapbooks, and wonderful poetry. So I wanted to ask you, Margo, when did you start writing poetry, and what made you start writing poetry?
I think that I started really writing from the very beginning of when I first started to write. I think that I was interested in poetry without really knowing it was poetry. And I think that probably that might have emanated from the background of my family through history. I think my family has been really interested in art, and for instance, Nicholas Longworth, one of my distant great-grandfathers, was a patron of the arts, and he was actually known as the father of American wine, and he was also a land speculator and lawyer, but he was a patron of Robert Duncanson, one of the first African-American artists in the United States, and many other important artists in Cincinnati. And
so art was important in your household?
Very important. It was very important, and my great-aunt was an artist, and she was really an iconic figure who I knew in our family. She never got married, but she did photography, and we really revered her. And as a contemporary, Jeffrey Harrison is my cousin. He's really one of the major American poets writing today. I think he's a wonderful poet.
Are you the first poet in your immediate family?
Yes. Although my mother was really an important force in terms of my own development. She was someone who wanted to be an artist. She was a beautiful woman, very, very intelligent, but also a manic depressive alcoholic. So while she wanted to be an artist, she was never able to fulfill that interest. Yet she was really a spoken word artist in the sense that she had an amazing command of language and a huge power and force in our family.
So almost through osmosis, you took in this desire to write and brought it forth, I guess.
But then what really made me think of writing poetry was when I went to college. I had the amazing fortune of being in a workshop with Denise Levertov, and she was one of the two most important teachers that I ever met, and she was an amazing poet, one of the Black Mountain poets, an incredible, forceful person, and just an amazing teacher.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to ask you to read the first poem, Why Poets Come from Ohio?
Sure.
And talk a little bit about that, where the poem came from.
Why so many poets come from Ohio. Some say El Nino blows them over the Rockies, and poets pool like guppies, grounded by the plains, hollowed into Ohio. How easy it is to forget the nameless places along the scant, unremarkable rivers, the burning, polluted creeks. Even horses pull themselves back from the earth to ignore where they were born. Why poets come from Ohio explains why shopping malls are built to last for centuries, why deer end up dead on I-80. Poets come from Ohio because of the homelessness of the hills, how they are low and huddled, as if long ago glaciers ran out of energy on the alluvial plain, leaving them unstated, looking westward for relief. Poets who wish to intone come from Ohio because nothing happens, only the sonorous gestation of their interiors. They search the soured hills for daffodils, for turnips, for everything they thought once grew there.
I love that poem. Can you tell us a little bit about where it came from? And
Well, I think just probably from growing up in Ohio and knowing so many of the great poets in the United States actually came from Ohio, James Wright happens to be really my favorite of all American poets, probably one of my favorite poets. So that was the inspiration.
yeah, I was going to ask you to read as your second poem, The Pear Orchard, and talk maybe a little before you read the poem, talk a little bit about how it grew.
The Pear Orchard, in my book Frozen Spring, many of the poems came from my family, and my father died when I was young, and then my stepfather died when I was in high school, so I think that, and then of course there were the assassinations of really important patriarchal figures in our society, so I was really affected by those losses, and I think that is really what inspired this poem.
Okay.
The Pear Orchard. Mother said you'd turn in your grave if you could know what we'd become. It was easy to see your face, pale and wrinkled, beautiful ghost. You beat the furnace pipes at night, the hiss and crack your disregard. Only you, the absent one, could save us. Before I shaved my legs, before I was president of 7th grade, you died. Mother told us not to cry. Uncles bordered your coffin. Their eyes, their bodies quivered in September wind. Now I never think of you, only mention you to the children so they know they come from somewhere. Nobody ever talks about you here. Mother never did, as if your very memory brought pain. Now we have lived so long without you. Your return in dreams is no longer welcome. It is only the house I long for, the minister's house lying low in the valley, the river view stretching out from the pear orchard. But so much has changed. But so much has happened. The house has changed. Much of the detail, much of the charm has been lost.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful poem. And just hearing it now, I'm thinking about it's a pear orchard, but there's also the other pear, like you pare down a life and sort of pare down a loss in some way in the poem.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. A lot of the poems in Frozen Spring seem to be dealing with recovering loss or trying to go back and make sense of loss, or I don't know. At least that's how I read it. It's a beautiful book, by the way. I would recommend it, Frozen Spring.
Thank you. Well, I think that because of the many deaths that I encountered, but also later as we were talking, I think that a lot of the poems have to do with recovering sort of loss from sort of family secrets, trying to find things that are hidden, which I believe poetry has a lot to do with searching for what is mysterious, what is hidden. It's kind of a science, really, although this society doesn't recognize it, but it's as important as science in the sense that it delves into the human condition and this sort of soul and trying to discover what is missing in the human world, the known world.
Yeah, I mean, your poems do have kind of a searching, haunting quality to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love them. I was going to ask you, it's a question that I like to ask a lot of poets, and that is, what do you think poetry gives to people that prose or fiction or nonfiction can't? What does poetry have to offer? And maybe you were starting to speak a little bit about that just now. Maybe that's...
I think that poetry is a forum for the expression of what is inexpressible, and it's also delving into the mystery of the human condition, the mystery of life as humans know it today or any time in the particular history that you live in. So it's a very important discipline, and it's actually, in my view, the highest form of creativity, higher than any other art form, probably because it involves something that is so intangible, whereas something like a work of art is something that you can hold and sell and value in that way, but poetry is totally sort of unseen, yet so important.
It's spoken and then it's gone.
Right.
Yeah.
And it has to do with spirituality and the most essential intrinsic elements of human existence.
Yeah. On that note, your poem on the possession of horses, Margo's a wonderful rider. And horses, I think, are important to you both in terms of, your physical body, but also your spiritual life in some way, or at least that's what I've gotten from this poem. And I was wondering if you would read it and talk a little bit about that.
Sure. On the possession of horses. Their heads hunker forward when they canter, as if only one direction were possible, and they don't understand fire. They gallop back to a burning barn. Nothing about horses compels me now, though once I wanted to be one. What do horses have to do with love, the quivering limbs of their bodies, their hearts chiseled from stone, and riders cling to them as if just this holding on, this staying on, could be everything. Once an entire village banned horses. You couldn't blame them after all the trouble. 1 minute normal, and the next, the children were possessed, leaving their comfortable beds at night, cavorting with horses from all around, under the laden apple trees. No one knows how they planned it. They rode horses by moonlight, bareback and bare-assed, even in thunderstorms. When horses trot and canter, their hooves clatter, their bones chime like funeral bells, like clappers. They ring against the earth. Their heavy hooves beat against the earth.
I love that poem. Aren't you putting together, or at one point you were putting together, an anthology of poems about horses?
Yes, we did put one together already that was published by Rizzoli, called Imperiled Landscapes, and we're working on another one and looking for a publisher. And actually, a poem of mine recently is appearing in another collection of poems about horses titled Cadence of Hooves, published by Yarroway Press, but we are definitely working on another collection.
Margo, I wanted to ask you to read your poem, The Cello. Can you tell us a little bit about where the poem came from? It's hard to write poems about music, so I really admired this poem a lot.
The poem really came from my oldest son, who played the cello, and it became such an important part of our family, just centered around this musical instrument and going to lessons, going to the Manhattan School of Music on a weekly basis, and just, it was a huge, important part of our family. But as with many poems, this was a kind of coalescence of different forces that were important in my life. I was also going to church at that time and just listening to the sermons and sort of the biblical references and imagery, and that also entered up into the poem a lot.
Yeah. Well, the poem goes so many interesting places. Would you read it?
Sure. The cello. Wood rooted to his hands, the strings extend his fingers to the tune, and the song overtakes his flowering body. The boy becomes the cello, the child becomes the flowers in the field, the morning dove, the morning sunlight, the boat becomes the sea. Small fluting necessities, the counter charms of life, random passion, passing grief, burnt offering, sheep stuck again in brambles, brindled, blood-red sacrificed, a man who wanted to be stuffed when he died and made into a chair, who wanted pretty girls to sit on him, run their fingers over his hair. Of all this the boy sings, how everyone is looking for love, bitter legends, weights pressed against paper, godlike. Whatever brings him back into the too dark sea, whatever brings him back into the too dark night, whatever brings the man to see, as if the land were a mirage, as if yearning for a mother's gentle rocking calls him. So what are you calling for? Why are you calling? The boy can barely hear your voice, so softly bleeding just out of reach, far out, even beyond this dream of stars.
Yeah, I love that poem, and I'm just noticing now, the boy becomes the cello, you wanted to be a horse, you have this sort of metamorphosis wish or something. Anyway, I'd like you to read Ascension, and and talk a little bit about where that came from.
Do you want me to read it first?
However you like.
Well, the poem actually, again, was written when my children were young, and we were doing a lot of reading about sea life, and it really came from reading a lot of books by naturalists. This particular book begins with an epigraph by the naturalist Faith McNulty. Ascension. It takes 7 strong men to drag the 6-foot heart of a blue whale across the deck of a whaling ship. Beads of sweat well up on the sea, stained faces of the 7 men who bear the still warm heart of the blue whale to the boiling vats. The men are deliverers. They tug, rip, tear the heart across the deck to the seething pots. But their hands stick to surfaces like fly paper and recoil, the red matter teething into fingers as if leaching out the blood. Ventricles, gaping mouths stand ajar. Red smoke rises in the darkening mist. Harsh wind raps against crevices, something trying to get back in, tapping out an aberrant beat, an unknown code, and something whines, long and low, a sea moan. Only a crane can lift a 6-foot heart, and as the last inch of the raised organ recedes into the stewing vats, dismembered parts of the heart ascend and billow over the deck. 7 men inhale the vision, their hearts slackening with each breath.
Yeah, I love that. You know the poet Kimiko Han talks a lot about receiving her poems with the help of the Science Times, and I think also having small kids and reading, a lot about animals and things.
And also, reading about whales was really critical, and being concerned about the fate of endangered whales.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you to read Night Rising. I don't know if you'd like to speak about it before or after, or did you want to read a little bit morning first?
No, it's fine with me.
Okay.
Night Rising. This is one of a number of poems that I've written about the suburbs, I would say, and it's titled Night Rising. To be willing to sit here like this with nothing on my mind, to be willing to waste this time day after day as if my life meant nothing to me. Muggy, measured air of late summer, leaden with cicadas, the circus of insects, the symphony of their short time left. To hear the birds way down the apple tree, to watch dahlias brown out in September, the infested, fallen blossoms on the weed-choked lawns. So many would give up everything for what I have. These worms split and drying on the paved avenues, yards and yards of worms, millions and millions, too many to count. Think of the 50,000 earthworms in an average backyard, their moist underbellies every night rising, curling over the lips of their individual holes. Think of their vast chasm of tunnels. They riddle the ground with their castings. It's always the leaves I come back to because I stare outside, and it's always the leaves pressed near windows, ghosts trying to get back in. It's always the leaves I see. When I lie down at night above the bitter opening of sleep, the sad pines, the sad crooked pines, and the birds listen, hear them, as if their song were made in heaven, something almost somnolent, something almost cold in the darkness, coming out of the green door, coming out like this, out of nowhere.
I love that poem. Another, I guess it's not really a poem about suburbia as much, but A Little Bit Mourning is a poem that I think a lot of parents can relate to. The child waking and being afraid. Would you read that?
Sure. A Little Bit Mourning. If he could get out of bed again and enter their room and tell them that it is morning, he could forget about drowning, about losing himself, getting to the door before invaders Before moonlight, the specter, he was racing for it, from his bed to the door, a chasm. The child comes in the middle of the night to his parents' door, his agile body prying open, prying into their sleep. The corpse of a headless monster bleeds on his bed. He hopes to be rid of it. It's a little bit morning, he announces so tentatively, his bare feet cold on the bare floor. The door to their room is wide, like the ocean, and just as cold. He swings it back and forth, making hinges squeak. He is afraid of what they will say. They will tell him it is not morning, and he will have to go back to his room and the empty bed and the corpse. More than anything, he wants to sleep next to his parents, press their warm skin against his, measure the rhythm of their breath. If he could wedge himself in bed between them, he could forget his dreams, that he will dream again. The noise will start, the shrill pitch of invaders enter him. He will drown, the water rising above his bed. The water creeps up, colder than the ocean, colder than the door to his parents' room, wider than his parents' door in front of his space. The boy's heels press down and down. His heels have made an impression. He refuses to go back to bed. He will stay here in the doorway, bent by refracted moonlight. He will neither enter nor return. He will not leave or be quiet. He will stay here as he is at this moment, in the doorway, waiting.
Yeah, I love that. And the way you can enter, the child's psyche is really, it's very strong. I was wondering if you would read on the child-rearing note the poem Weaning.
Sure.
And maybe talk a bit about that, because it's not just about, but...
I think that both of the poems, when I think about them, are about a child becoming independent of the parent, and weaning is taken from an earlier perspective of a child in an earlier point of life, obviously. Weaning.
Hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. Weaning. A sodden act, this wrenching apart. The bald cicada remembers us, trying to adjust. Milk fills an empty space. The infant's gone on, gone on. Children rustle in their beds, dried leaves, their bodies crumble against covers. The rocking horses are wooden with sleep, soot where their dusty eyes should be. Train whistle, noise of daybreak, weed-grown reminder of whistles, back, trains back, corridors of trains dreaming back. So little laughs. Could a man or woman live 10,000 days or years, my son asks? How hard could a car hit a house? Across the road, a man is raking leaves. This is the way it will always be. He holds a gold-pronged rake. Fur fragments, filaments, nest builders. The leaves are disconnected from the tree, plugs pulled out, bare space.
Love that.
Thank you.
Do we have time for one more? Okay. I was wondering if you would read Queen City, another poem about Ohio, which we started with Ohio. We can end with Ohio. And maybe we'll have time for one more, though I'm not sure.
This poem is about Cincinnati, and that's the city where I grew up. Queen City. Coming back to Cincinnati, the site of my birth, a wayward soul looking for a sign. I see the city stretching out like a forsworn promise. The next thing to cleanliness, Cincinnati, host to Procter & Gamble and the Smut Buster. I now return to the city like a blind man, inhabiting a woman's body, an alien within an alien, hopelessly lost, sensing Cincinnati will always be foreign. The city will always catapult me to a childhood endlessly spinning out of control, doomed in space. Cincinnati, oh city of fountains, squares, towering new buildings I do not recognize. What is your plan? Returning to the once great Queen City, riverboat town, gateway to the south. I find the ghosts of the Underground Railroad, courthouse fire, race riots, boycotts. In this place of my birth where crows combed the outlying fields in awful stillness, where dogs barked as if they alone knew their voices echoed for miles down hollows. Where are you now? Where is the Cincinnati filled with tangible strength, suppressed love, waiting breath? This city of my youth where everything opened, where smells of spring meant daffodils covered whole hillsides with yellow, city of the once almost burning Ohio River, trashed by Mrs. Trollope. Why am I coming back to you, land restlessly stolen, abandoned in adolescent despair, vanished island, lost promise of light?
Beautiful. And again, in your poetry, I always feel this desire to go back and recover what was lost in some way or to find some new way of seeing it. Margo, I wanted to thank you so much for being on Poetry
Thank you.
Break.
I'm so honored to be invited to read here. Thank you so much, Sally.
Oh, well, thank you for coming. Thank you for watching another Poetry Break.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Levinson from the Women's Club of Rye, and I'm talking to you about rugs today. Why am I talking to you about rugs? Because coming up early in November, the Women's Club of Rye is hosting their annual fundraiser here at the Rye Middle School gym. It's November 8th from 10 to 5 and November 9th, which is a Sunday, from 10 to 4. And we've changed the timing this year. We used to do our sale in February, and this year we've moved it to early November to coincide with all the pre-holiday sprucing up that people do for their homes. So if you've been considering purchasing a rug, now is a great time to do something good for yourself and something good for the community. Now, I say good for you because these rugs are being sold at a huge savings. They're from two vendors whose rugs are literally in hundreds of homes in the Rye area. So again, come to the Rye Middle School gym November 8th and November 9th, and you'll get a terrific rug for the holidays. So bring in your fabrics, whether you have taste that runs towards modern or transitional or traditional. We have a rug for you. Bring in fabrics and paint colors from your home, and we'll help you choose a rug to give your home a whole new look. We have a huge range of sizes, from small mats to oversized rugs. We have rugs at this sale that would be terrific for children.